So welcome everyone. This is our final session in our series. We're going to talk about developing a success mindset. And in a way, what we're talking about tonight is pulling together a lot of the pieces that we've covered over the last, couple months, and just starting to put this into a bigger topic. I guess the overarching piece of this is success. We'll talk about confidence, but we'll also talk about different things you can be doing to really start pulling these pieces together. And a lot of it will still come back to things like emotional control and focus and ideal performance state and visualization. All those are really key pieces, but just to give you some additional things to be thinking about, obviously, as we wrap up this section. Obviously, at any point, you're welcome to reach out to me for additional help or reach out to Steve if you've got requests for topics, but this is the last one we have scheduled for this point in time, at least. So with that, let's jump into it. Like I said earlier, no set handout, but if you've got pen and paper or something to make some notes with, that's great. We'll do our mid-session break where Steve will ask you some questions for some prizes. So let's jump in. So like I said, overarching, the idea is success, but want to just start off with a bit of a conversation around confidence. And so I know this is something that a lot of athletes that I work with struggle with. They say they would like to be more confident or that they struggle with confidence. It's something that typically comes up quite a bit. That being said, I know a lot of athletes know what they feel like when they're confident and they know what that is for them. So just curious if you can put this in the chat, either to everyone or just directly to me. What is confidence for you? How would you describe it, or what does that feel like, or what do you think of when we talk about confidence? Just curious what your thoughts are on this. Okay, so one of the things that's coming in is positive thoughts. So yeah, being able to focus on those things that are maybe more helpful for you, feeling more encouraging, more positive. We've got a couple other ones. Believing in yourself. Yeah, absolutely. The belief in your own ability. So those are a couple that came in right at the same time, both centering around that idea of belief. So yeah, that can be a really big thing that comes into play. Any other thoughts about confidence, what that is for you, or how you would describe it or define it? Again, it's one of those things that we know when we feel confident, or we kind of know what that is for ourselves, but sometimes it's more difficult to put into words. So even if you have things that echo what's already been said, or slightly different wording, that's great too. Okay, and if you don't have anything, that's fine too, or maybe you're not wanting to share, that's okay. This is just something that I think it is important to think about what this is for you. It can also be important to think about when you feel confident, what's going on for you, what are some of the things that are happening. And so that's another question that we'll kind of encourage you to think about. That being said, one of the definitions of confidence, sorry, I just need to exit out of the chat to pull that up. A feeling of certainty or assurance. So really feeling like the outcome that we want is going to happen because of how we feel. So we feel really cool, calm, collected. We feel at ease and control. Maybe we have this absolute belief that we're going to perform well or get that outcome or that end result that we want. And sometimes we feel like there's an absence of fear or absence of doubts. And so sometimes that's one way that we can describe it. Another way to describe it is, and sorry, it's not coming up again. There we go. An act of trust or reliance. And so this is something that I think is really interesting to be thinking about too, is just something that we're able to go through. We're able to emphasize what our actions are doing. And so are the steps that we take in line with how we want to be and what we want to do. And so it kind of comes back to this idea that we don't have to wait to feel 100% confident or 100% ready before we do something, because if that was the case, we would rarely act. Instead, it's about being able to trust ourselves, our actions, and really believe that we can take steps forward no matter what. And so with this is one of the things that we want to emphasize through the session tonight, that it's more about our actions. It's more about the steps that we're taking. Yes, that feeling is nice, that feeling of being confident and in control, but we want to really emphasize the actions that we can take. And as we talked about or as we will talk about, our actions can really obviously help to lead to success, but our actions can really influence our mindset just because things can be so heavily intertwined that way. So yeah, there's this idea of being prepared. And so I think, yeah, what are we doing to feel prepared? And what are some of the things that help to contribute with that? So that's one thing I want you to keep in mind. We're going to keep coming back to these actions as we move through the session tonight. The next thing, so we've got a couple different ideas about confidence, a couple different rules, if you want to call them that. And so the first one kind of continues off of those definitions that I gave you. So the actions of confidence come first. So we want to act like we're confident. We want to move towards the things that we want to pursue. We want to work towards those small goals that lead us to those big goals. We want to carry ourselves in certain ways. We want to talk and think, and all those things are going to be the building blocks, and then the feelings of confidence come after. And so we might not always feel confident, but we want to act in ways that are still moving us forward. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. And then the second thing that we'll come back to towards the end of the presentation, and this kind of comes back to the emotions that we talked about as well. Negative thoughts are normal. And again, we don't necessarily need to term it as negative thoughts. We can term them maybe less helpful thoughts. Those are normal. Those are part of just being human, just like we have that spectrum of emotions. We don't want to fight them. We just want to learn how to manage them. Again, just like we want to learn how to manage those emotions that we talked about last time. And so what we're going to do in our presentation tonight is we're going to talk about what kinds of actions we can take to start building confidence. So we're going to go into some of those very action-based pieces. And we're also going to talk about ways to manage our thinking. So ways to manage our thought patterns to really build into this success mindset. So basically the premise or the main things that we're going to go over for our conversation tonight are about these 6 different pieces and how we can really be using these as our building blocks for building this success mindset. You can see we want to look at practice, we want to look at using strengths, we want to look at addressing self-talk, we want to really look at how we can use the brain-body connection. I've talked about that through some of our presentations, being able to build habits, and then the last one, committing to 0 talent improvements. So looking at how we can use all of these different things to really develop a success mindset. And I know some of you are thinking, well, what kinds of action should I be taking? What should I be doing? If you are, that's great. These are things that we're going to be talking about through the presentation. Again, just to be adding additional pieces in to the skills that we've already gone over. So we're going to start obviously with that first one, practice, practice, practice. This is where we start to get into the confidence cycle. And this comes out of a book called The Confidence Gap. It's by Russ Harris. He's got some really interesting books. If it's something that's of interest to you, I can put the reference in the chat later. But basically, he says the best way to build confidence and the best way to build skill is just to practice. And so obviously, we're going to start at the top, practicing the skills. This is just where practice, practice, practice. And again, it seems straightforward, but sometimes people get stuck here where we feel unmotivated or we doubt ourselves. Sometimes we procrastinate. We want to give up when we don't see progress, or we want to give up when we make a mistake. So sometimes we just get stuck because we don't always want to put in the work, or maybe sometimes we can't put in the work. But obviously practice is the only way that we can actually get better at something. From there, we also want to look at how we're applying those skills effectively. And so we don't want to just use the skills and use them in easy situations. We want to use our skills in a variety of situations. And so it can be easy to be good, and it can be easy to use our skills when things are easy. When we set ourselves up for success, obviously we want to do that to build that base, but we also want to try to practice our skills in a variety of situations. So in those easy situations, but also in challenging situations. And that's a way to progress and adapt. And you want to focus on what you're doing. Obviously, this comes back to the focus presentation that we did, bringing our attention back to that task at hand, back to the present moment. So that's all part of applying those skills effectively. After we've done that, after you've gone out and had a practice session, whether it's doing a whole round or whether it's at the driving range or whether it's practicing your putting, whatever it is, then you assess the results. And the easiest way to do this, well, obviously you can do it in a number of different ways, but the easiest way to kind of question yourself on this, what worked? So starting to go over those things for yourself. What was good today? What worked? And what didn't work? And you ask yourself that question, you start gathering that data. Obviously, you can do this in training, you can do it in competition. But if you can be open to that learning, if you can be open to feedback from a coach or from someone else, that's a way to get better. And part of that I know is sometimes we feel a little bit unsure. We feel like we don't want to always to have that information. So I really encourage you as part of this part to be open to it. And so not to be too judgmental about your results or your progress, or maybe feeling like there's a lack of results or lack of progress, but it's just about being kind and being supportive and being encouraging to yourself like you would be to other people. So you're assessing it, but you're also kind of supporting yourself through that process. And then from there, you've got that information about what worked and what didn't work. You move into modifying as needed. And so you obviously want to do more of what worked well. You want to try to amplify those things. But then you also want to look at changing or modifying what isn't working. And so there's a quote, and I'm sure people have heard it, but if you do what you've always done, you're going to get what you've always gotten. And so being able to make those modifications, make those changes, and then it just comes back to practice. And so I know a lot of this isn't necessarily new or straightforward, but sometimes, or sorry, new or kind of out of the ordinary. It's probably fairly straightforward, but sometimes we need a reminder about those straightforward pieces just to really emphasize that one way to build confidence is by practicing and learning and pulling that information all together. And so you keep going through the cycle over and over, you're going to get better. And so I think that's a really important reminder to give you at this point. So that's one of the ways that we can really be using our actions to obviously build up confidence, but also to build up our success mindset. Our second one, so the second one on that list of 6 things to build our success mindset is by using our strengths. And we use our strengths for a number of different reasons. Sometimes they're strengths that we've cultivated. Sometimes they're things that we've worked really hard to build up and get better at. Sometimes our strengths are just things that are natural to us based on our personality and based on who we are. That being said, regardless of whether it's a developed strength or a natural strength, we tend to be happier and more satisfied when we're using our personal strengths. And this is one of the situations that can apply obviously day to day in terms of all aspects of our life, but it can really apply back to our sport too. And so we want to start working on being able to recognize and appreciate our own strengths, being able to recognize and appreciate our own qualities, what we bring into situations. But we also want to be able to use these strengths as a way to overcome challenges and a way to overcome adversities. So we talked about being able to practice in so many different situations, being able to challenge ourselves in different ways. One of the ways that we can start managing those challenges is by actually applying our strengths and starting to think through, okay, these are my strengths and this is how I can apply them, or this is how I can use them to help me manage in these difficult situations. And so this actually comes out of a questionnaire that you can do. It's the VIA character strengths. I encourage you to do it afterwards if it's something that you're interested in. You can just go to viacharacter.org and it goes through a series of fairly quick questions, and then you get your results at the end. And I think you have to make an account. It's free. It's just a way for then you to get your results kind of stored. But what we're going to do tonight, instead of actually going through that questionnaire, is I'm going to get you to take a look at these different strengths and see what do you think are your top 3 strengths. So obviously you can look at kind of yourself as a person, you can look at yourself as an athlete, however you want to define that for yourself, but what kinds of strengths do you notice in yourself? And if you're struggling with kind of defining any of these, let me know. I've got the definitions that I can pull up for you. But just want you to start by thinking about what are your top 3 strengths. So I'll give you a few minutes to look at that. So if you've started to think through those top 3 strengths for yourself, the next thing I want you to think about is how you can use those strengths in your training and your competition. So you can take one of them, you can take all three of them, but just start thinking, okay, as an example, maybe your strength is love of learning. Maybe that's one of the strengths that you have. Awesome. How are you going to apply that in your training and your competition? So an example could be that you're going to ask your coach a ton of questions. So you're going to ask for a lot of feedback. Or maybe you really like our halftime breaks when Steve goes over those quizzes because you get a chance to learn and go over some of the rules. So maybe there's different ways that you're able to learn. And so you're able to apply that wanting to gather information and wanting to gather knowledge in a few different ways. So maybe that would be an example of how you're applying that strength. Maybe your strength is perspective. You're really good at seeing kind of the big picture. So if you're having a bad day, you're recognizing, yeah, this isn't ideal. This isn't how I want it to be, but I know that I am doing these little things well. And so you're able to kind of focus on the whole picture as opposed to just the negatives or just the things that aren't going well. So those are a couple examples. I want you to take a look at your top three, and you can pick one, you can pick a couple. I'll give you a minute or two, but just to think about how you can use those strengths in your training and in your competition. So if you're still writing, please keep writing. Not trying to rush you. I know athletes especially tend to focus on the things that they're not good at, because if we can identify things that aren't going well or weaknesses or those gaps, that's obviously how we get better. And so sometimes it seems a little foreign or a little bit different to actually think about those things that we're good at. But I really encourage you to think about this for all aspects. So for your physical game, for looking at characteristics that you bring, anytime we can think about the things that we're doing well and those strengths that we have, it's a really good way to build up that confidence, because it's things that we know we can do well, but it's also a really good way to build up that success mindset, because it gives us something that we can lean on. It gives us something that we can always come back to help us overcome some of those challenges and help us kind of navigate the ups and downs. And so I'm going to ask you to share one of your strengths in the chat. Again, if you want to put it directly to me, that's fine. If you want to put it to everyone, that's great too. This is about owning our strengths. Again, we don't always talk about this. And so sometimes it's just, I know it can seem like a little bit intimidating or a little bit vulnerable sometimes to be sharing it, but it's just about being able to actually put that voice to it and say, this is my strength, this is something that I'm good at. So I'll get you to put that in the chat, again, either to everyone or just to me. Okay, so we've got humor so far, awesome. Perseverance, really good. Love of learning, perfect. Leadership, nice, that's great. Another love of learning, awesome. Kindness, really great. Creativity, perfect. Okay, so thanks for sharing. Like I said, I know sometimes it feels a little bit weird, and sometimes it feels weird to say it to people we know well. Sometimes it feels safer to say it with strangers. Sometimes we're more comfortable with people we know, and it feels weird with strangers. So just kind of think about what that is for you. But again, this can be a really helpful thing just to be building off and using as part of your success mindset to make sure that you're taking those steps forward. And especially if we go back to the that cycle that we talked about just previously, the practice, practice, practice. These are things that you can really be incorporating as part of that practice, and then being able to look at applying them effectively, being able to look at assessment, assessing the results, how it's going, and then making those modifications. So I actually have Steve's presentation next. I misjudged. Most of the time I've been pretty good at putting it halfway, pretty much exactly. But we'll do a kind of third of the way through presentation break, I guess. There we go.
Okay, thanks, Lisa. Well, this is the last halftime rules quiz, so I hope you all enjoyed it. Maybe learned a thing or two, and yeah. Obviously, so just send in your answer via directly to me or publicly, whichever you like. So go ahead, Lisa, to the first question. Okay, what is the penalty for starting a round with more than 14 clubs in your bag and stroke play? 1 stroke, 2 strokes, general penalty, 2 strokes per hole, maximum of 4. No penalty, you can play as many clubs as you want. Couple twos. It's always a good one to check before. As starters, we try and remind you guys. Go ahead to the next slide. So in stroke play, it is 2 penalty strokes for each hole where the breach happened, with a maximum of 4 penalty strokes. So I don't believe anybody picked that one. So it goes up to 4 strokes total. Match play, you lose holes. So again, you must not start around with more than 14 clubs or have more than 14 during the round. If you start a round with fewer, you may add during the round up to the 14 club limit. Sometimes good to have a phone. If you notice you're short, call your mom or brother or somebody, bring your driver. Okay, so let's go to the next question. Which statement is correct on a player announcing a provisional ball? Going to reload. I'm going to play another. I'm going to play another just in case. Should I hit a provisional? 3, I got some 2s. 3. Okay, go to the answer, Lisa. None. So when a player playing a provisional ball, it is best the player uses the word provisional in his or her announcement. However, other statements that make it clear that the player's intent to play a provisional ball are acceptable. Okay, so ideally say provisional. For example, with the other player nearby, if a player states that he or she will be playing a provisional but does not say it in a way that anybody can hear it, that doesn't satisfy the requirement. So you kind of mumble to yourself as you're walking back to your bag. Nobody hears it. Actually, now that you've dropped that ball is now in play. You don't even get to go look at that other one. So you definitely make sure everybody knows in your group. There's instances where you have to go back to the tee, nobody's around. Try and let people know as what you're up to. So, okay, Lisa, next one. Can you substitute a ball in play? This is a good one. Yes. Yes to the general penalty, or no. So say the ball's say it has a cut or a scrape. What do you do? Let's go to the answer. So if a ball becomes cut or cracked while playing, lifting the ball to see if it's cut or cracked, so you must mark it and look at it. Do not clean the ball, or you'll receive a penalty for that unless you're on the putting green. The player lifts the ball without having this reasonable belief, except when you're on the putting green, fails to mark the spot, there's a 1-stroke penalty if you didn't mark the spot. When another ball may be substituted, the player may only substitute another ball if it is clearly seen that the original ball is cut or cracked, is damaged during the hole being played. Sometimes you get a scratch or a scrape, just the paint is damaged, discolored. It must be cracked in order to do so. So you can mark it, check it, don't clean it. If it's cracked, say, hey, I'm exchanging balls, substituting balls, and away you go, put it back in the exact spot. I haven't seen it yet in the 25 to 30 years I've played golf, but you never know. Okay, that's, I believe that's it. Lisa, one more?
No, you got it. That's
I
it.
think that's all.
Yeah.
Okay, so thanks all for playing. That was some good, tough questions. I'll turn it back over to Lisa.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so we've gone through 2 of our 6 strategies. We've looked at practice, practice, practice. We've looked at using our strengths. So I want to spend obviously the remainder of the presentation just going over those last 4, with our first one being able to just look at how we're dealing with negative thoughts. And so one of the things I'm going to say here is I've got the term negative thoughts. I would actually encourage you to kind of think about this as less helpful thoughts, because when we start saying negative, we put a bit of a judgment on what is good and what is bad. Ultimately, we need to say, is this thought helpful or not? Because sometimes we can have those thoughts that are what we see as negative, like, oh, that was a horrible shot. But maybe you're saying it and it actually means like, you know what? Yeah, that was horrible, but I know I can do better. Maybe there's that, like you've got that kind of spin to it. And so is this thought helpful? Is it unhelpful? I think that's maybe more of a, I encourage you to kind of think about those terms. It's kind of like we did with the emotions, the positive emotions, negative emotions. They're just emotions. These are just thoughts. Whether or not they're helping us to take steps forward in the way that we want to is going to be what helps us to determine, is this something that's building the success mindset, or is this something that's maybe taking away from that? So we could spend a whole session here. I wanted to just touch on some of these things to be able to actually go over some of the cognitive strategies that can be helpful in terms of addressing our thinking patterns and addressing some of those things that are less than helpful. So we've got 3 different strategies that I'm going to go over fairly quickly. The first one here is looking at how we can actually reframe those thoughts. And so this isn't necessarily trying to turn something negative into a positive. This is more about kind of replacing something. So we have a thought that's less helpful. Okay, let's look at how we can replace it or how we can shift it into something that's more helpful. And so some of the things that we want to do here is look at, are there words that we're using that are very kind of definitive? So words like always, should, never, have to, I always play bad on this course, or I never make that shot, or we can have those really kind of definitive words. You might replace it with, okay, well, last time I didn't play well here. And then obviously that kind of leads into, doesn't mean I can't play well here this time. So those would be an example of how you might replace it. You can also look at some of the emotions maybe that you're using. If we kind of go back to that last presentation, I hate this, I hate what's going on right now, or I'm so mad, I'm so frustrated. You might be using some of those things. Or you might replace it with, well, it's not my favorite, or I'm annoyed, I'm a bit irritated. And so you're replacing it with milder wording. Again, sometimes when we challenge the words that we're using, we realize that maybe they're kind of influencing us to think in a certain way. And by changing up that wording, it can turn something that feels negative into something that's more neutral or more manageable. So that could be something that you can be trying out as well. One of the other things that you can do is just, I kind of talked about this with perspective a little bit, but see if there are other pieces to what's going on. So like this round is going horribly. I haven't been playing well at all. Maybe that's those are some of the thoughts that you're having. People challenge that. Has every single shot been bad? Has the whole thing been 100% like miserable? Be able to start looking, are there maybe some things that challenge that? Are there some good things? Are there some positives? So anytime we can try to see that whole picture or look at that whole perspective, that might be something that is helpful as well. So one of the things that I'm going to encourage you to do here is look at what are some of the maybe less than helpful thoughts that you have. So this could be with regards to a certain aspect of your play. This could be in regards to a certain maybe tournament or course or person that you golf with. There can be negative thoughts about so many different things, but just trying to identify what are some of those thoughts that you have, like even I can't do this or I can't make that shot, those kinds of things. What are some of those thoughts that maybe you have for yourself? I want you to just start by jotting down a couple that you can think of just as a starting point. And so once you have some of those negative thoughts written down, what I want you to do is I want you to see if there's a way that you can reframe this. So is there a way that you can look at this thought that is more neutral, that takes out some of those shoulds or those have tos or those nevers? You can use what milder language. Just see if there's a way that you can reframe this for yourself. And so it doesn't mean that you have to change it to totally positive that I can always do this, of course, because that's not always believable. It's just about putting it in a way that's maybe going to be more helpful for you. And so I want you to just take a look at the thoughts that you've written down and see if there's a way that you can try to reframe that for yourself. So again, I'll give you a minute with that. Okay, so obviously not having an idea of what you wrote down, everyone maybe has different negative thoughts. Um, some of the things that you could have written down, I'll give you a couple examples. So um, maybe you're starting to think about like the outcome. You're starting to think, you're adding things up in your mind. You think, I'm never going to get the score that I want. This is too hard. I'm never, and you're starting to kind of feed into that. And so maybe you're thinking, okay, just this hole, just this shot. And so maybe you're just starting to break it down that way. You're just bringing it back to one thing at a time. And so it's not necessarily positive, but it's more helpful because it's really just getting you to think about what you can do, think about what you can control. And so that could be a way to just reframe and bring it back to something that's going to be more helpful. Maybe you're thinking, okay, this person's way better than me. There's no way that I'm going to be able to have a good game. Like you're starting to maybe compare to their style or your style or their shots or your shots. And so maybe it's just being able to, again, bring it back to yourself. Maybe you're thinking, okay, focus on my own game, focus on my own shots. You're able to just kind of bring it back to yourself. Again, it's not necessarily a really positive thing. It's just something that's going to be more helpful for you. Maybe you're thinking something like, I suck, I can't do this. And again, you could start to kind of question some of the language in there, start thinking about the shots that you've made that have been really great as a way to counter some of that thinking that you suck. You might also just think, you know what, I'm going to keep working hard. I'm going to put in my effort. I'm going to trust my body. And so maybe it's just coming back to that. So those are obviously just some examples. There's so many different ways to reframe it. It's just about thinking what's going to be helpful for me right now, what's going to contribute into that success mindset that's going to help me to keep taking those steps forward and keep moving myself in the direction that I want to. It's going to be most helpful. So that's one of the ways that we can start dealing with negative thoughts. The second one is more about accepting. And we kind of talked about this with the emotions, just recognizing that just like emotions, our thoughts come and go. So we have anywhere from 50,000 to 70,000 thoughts a day. So that's a lot of thoughts. And some of them we're really conscious of, some of them we really kind of dive into. Some of them go through our mind and we don't even really recognize them. We don't even really pay that much attention to them. That being said, because we have so many thoughts, we don't have to let them control us. We can choose what we're paying attention to. We can start to just recognize that we can let those thoughts move past as opposed to kind of hanging on to them or feeling like we're getting hooked into that thought and what it's telling us. And so again, there's lots of different ways to do this, but one example could be just to kind of incorporate a visualization aspect to it, where you're imagining that you're putting that thought maybe on a leaf that's floating down a river or floating down a stream, and you're kind of seeing it move away. And so it's something that's going out of your head. So that could be one way just to recognize, you know what, this thought is something that can kind of just move past. Sometimes people feel like, you know what, a river doesn't move that fast. That thought's going to hang around longer than I'd like to. Another way could be to imagine that it's maybe a car driving down the street. So you can hear it coming, it gets loud as it goes by your house, and then it starts to fade off again. And so just again, recognizing that these thoughts come and go. We don't have to actually pay attention to it. We can recognize, okay, that thought is there, but then we can choose to redirect our attention to something else. And so with that, that acceptance then kind of feeds pretty well into the immersive idea. And this kind of goes back to some of the focus that we talked about a few sessions ago. But this is really when you start to engage with what you're doing. And so you deal with some of those less than helpful thoughts, or those negative thoughts, if you want to use that term, by just really focusing your thoughts on what you're doing. Being able to really engage with your surroundings, being able to engage with your body. Again, when we talked about focus, we talked about the external, so what's going on in the environment. We talked about the internal. Those would be a couple different ways that you could actually direct your thoughts as a way to just immerse yourself differently. That's going to enhance your experience. You're going to start thinking about things that are maybe more effective for you. And it's also going to have a shift in terms of some of your thoughts and feelings. So again, anytime we can start directing our thoughts in more effective ways, more helpful ways, that's going to then contribute into starting to think the way we want, starting to feel the way we want, which is going to obviously help our success mindset as well. So those are some of the different strategies that you can be using there. So those are our 3 strategies. We'll move into our 4th strategy, which is using our brain-body connection. And I'm not going to talk too much about how our brain and body are connected, but obviously they are. You can think, you know what, I'm thirsty, I want a drink of water. You reach for your water bottle. And so we sometimes have these thoughts and these actions that are so intertwined, we don't even stop to think about them. Obviously, some we're more conscious of because we have to kind of talk ourselves through what we need to do or how we're going to do it. Maybe you're solving like a really difficult math problem and you have to think it through. Maybe it's something else, but our brains and bodies are connected. And so we want to, with this, in terms of our success mindset, we want to use our body to actually influence how our brain reacts. And so this is where we want to actually use our body language as a way to shape how our brain is reacting. When we hold our bodies in certain ways, it's going to then kind of influence how our brain is thinking. And so what this is called power pose. And basically you just want to stand like one of these superheroes here, where you stand with your feet shoulder width apart, maybe a little bit further than shoulder width apart, but about that, so it feels comfortable. Put your hands on your hips. You make sure you're standing up tall, good posture. You kind of put your chest forward a little bit, shoulders are down and back, and your chin's kind of up and you're looking straight ahead. And so by actually just taking this pose, our body language starts to govern how we think and feel about ourselves. Just because of how we're holding our body, it has a significant impact on our mind. And so by commanding this powerful pose, we actually start to help ourselves feel more comfortable, but we also start to help ourselves feel just kind of more positive and more powerful. And so what they encourage, like what research encourages, is that you hold this pose for 2 minutes. It's a long time to stand like that. What I found is even if you stand like this for 15 or 20 seconds, it can make a big difference just in terms of how you start to think and how you start to feel. You can do it looking in the mirror. You can do it just as you're about to tee off. You can do it so many different situations. A lot of times people don't even really notice what you're doing. But if you're just kind of paying attention to how you're standing, again, it can make a big difference in terms of just how that's feeling. So what I'm going to do is I know most of your cameras are off, but I'm going to encourage you to just stand up right now and just test out this pose. You can do it for about 15 or 20 seconds. Just kind of feel what that feels like. Can stand like the superheroes on the page. Again, feet are about shoulder width apart. You want your hands on your hip. You want yourself standing up with that good posture. Kind of put your chest out, your shoulders down, your chin is up and you're looking straight ahead. And you're just kind of paying attention to how that feels for you. Just kind of take those deep breaths and just notice that change that's happening. Okay, so I counted to 20 in my head. That was about 20 seconds, maybe a little bit longer. Please feel free to sit down again. But this is one of those pieces that just demonstrates that brain-body connection that we have, and it can start to make a big difference when we're holding our body kind of in that more powerful body language. It sends some pretty powerful messages to our brain. That's going to change how we start to think about ourselves, change how we're thinking about what we're doing, how we're interacting with people, how we're engaging with the environment. Those are all really important things that can then impact our success mindset and impact some of those confidence actions that we're taking. So that can be one strategy that you can be doing. The next one is another brain body connection, but this one is slightly different. This comes back to basically just being able to smile. And there's a lot of research out there. Alex Hutchinson wrote about it in his book. Eliud Kipchoge, the marathon runner who was the first one to break 2 hours, he used this during his run when he broke 2 hours. Basically, what research shows is that when we smile, it's a very deliberate way to help our bodies relax. It's again that brain body connection that if I'm smiling, I must be happy and I must be kind of having some of those happier emotions, and I'm probably going to have some of those happier thoughts. It doesn't switch things automatically. It's not a all 100% cure. It's just it starts to shift things gradually. And so it can be a way to relax. It can be a way to start just trying to manage some of the fatigue that you're feeling. It can be a way to just help your body start acting more efficiently just because you're actually smiling. And so basically what it does is it triggers different hormones in your brain, which can then actually start to impact the mood that you're having and impact the thoughts that you're having. And so smiling can actually make it easier for us to recognize positive thinking, recognize positive situations, and it can help us to reduce stress. And so you can, if you want to try this out, you can focus on just smiling for the heck of it. You can just kind of put a smile on your face, or you can think of something that makes you smile and kind of have that in your mind while you're smiling. Or if you're on the golf course and it's a nice day, maybe you're just looking at the scenery and smiling and kind of enjoying where you're at. So again, it's one of those things that can seem really basic and really straightforward, but if we want to really build into that success mindset, we can use our body in a couple different ways that just helps to enhance how our brain is actually functioning, and then set us up to have that better thinking patterns and better success mindset. So those are a couple from the brain body connection. We're moving into our fifth one, which is build a habit. And you've probably seen this quote before: we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence is therefore not an act, but a habit. And so this is one of those things where we know that some of these pieces that we've been talking about, whether it's the focus or looking at ideal performance state or managing emotions or visualization, or even kind of building this confidence and building this success mindset that we're talking about, these can take time. Those are all some of the mental skills. It's about actually building up a skill, just like you're building up your golf skills. And those are obviously not the only things that you might want to be working on. Maybe you're looking at, I want to be drinking more water. I want to be going to bed earlier. I want to be whatever it is. We want to start thinking about those things that can actually set us up to be more successful. And so in a way, it's kind of a goal setting piece, but looking at what are the habits that I want to be doing? What are the habits that are going to help me be successful? Maybe it's just, for example, knowing that you've got a snack in your bag. Maybe that's something that is really important for you. And so with this, in terms of building a habit, habits take a while to build. There's research that says habits take anywhere from 3 weeks to 4 months. So 21 days to 120 days. And it's quite a range. It obviously depends on what you're trying to do, how often you're already doing it. So say the habit that you want to build is drinking 2 liters of water a day, and you're at 1.5 right now, and 2 liters isn't that much of a jump. Probably not going to take that much longer to get 2 liters as a good habit. But if you're currently drinking 0 water a day and want to get up to 2 liters, that's going to take a bit more time. So sometimes our habits just depend on where we're at already and how much progress we need to make. So in terms of some of these habits, it's about being patient with yourself. It's about that persistence, being able to keep at it, keep trying, even if you miss a day and you're down to 0 again. Okay, let's try for 2 liters the next day. And so with this, obviously we've done a lot of talking about different mental skills, but like I said, those aren't the only things that are going to help you to be successful. It's just looking at what are some of the things in your day-to-day that you are maybe thinking about changing, but for whatever reason you haven't, or maybe you've tried to make some changes but haven't been able to stick with it yet. And so what I want you to do is I want you to think about what's one thing, one habit that you're committed to building. And so if we take kind of that average between 3 weeks and 4 months, I want you to think about something that you're committed to doing for the next 2 months. So it's the end of March right now, something that you're committed to doing until the end of May. And so you want this to be something that is obviously realistic for you, something that you have time in your day, but something that you have to put a little bit of effort or a little bit of thought into doing. And so again, this can be whatever you think is going to be most helpful for you in your success mindset, but I want you to jot this down for yourself. Okay, we've got a comment, 10,000 steps every day. Perfect. That's a really good example of a habit or something that you want to be building into. So that's one example. It could be around, like I said, nutrition, fueling, sleeping. It could be that you want to read, or you want to meditate, or you want to practice gratitude, or maybe you want to visualize, like whatever it is, whatever habit it is. I encourage you to obviously write it down for yourself. And if you want to, please feel free to put it in the chat. It's another way of holding yourself accountable for this habit that you want to be building. And maybe just one other piece. Obviously, if you want this to be sport related, that's great. If there's a habit that's first thing in your mind as I was talking about this, and maybe it's not related to sport at all, that's fine. Habits are good things to be building, and sometimes one habit helps to build another one. So don't judge it just because if it's not sport related, that's fine. Whatever you want to write or whatever feels kind of most in tune with where you're at right now, go with that one. So again, write it down for yourself. But if you want to share it, it's a great way to hold yourself accountable to it as well. And you can share it with everyone, or you can share it just with me. Okay, so hopefully everyone has their habit written down. Awesome, I've got another one. Golf every day, whether I'm at the course or practicing at home. Perfect. And so I think that's great. You can look at how that works for you. You can be creative with what that is each day. But I think that's a really great example of a habit. Thank you for sharing that. If there are other people that want to share it, direct message to me is perfect too. I'm not going to say your name, but if you want someone else to know, I'm happy to support you in it. If you don't want to tell me, or if you don't want to tell the group tonight, that's fine too. What I would encourage you to do is tell someone else, tell a parent or a sibling or a friend, tell someone that's in your life that can support it, because if people know, then we can sometimes feel more accountable with it as well. So I'm happy to hear them if you'd like to share. Okay, so moving into our last one, which is committing to 0 talent improvements. And maybe you're kind of wondering what this is, but I've seen this before and I came across it again recently. And I think it's great because there are so many important things in here that don't have anything to do with being a talented person or a talented athlete. They require effort. They require things that you maybe need to put some effort into, but it's not about that talent. And so there are so many different things here that can make a big difference in terms of how you're showing up for other people and how you're showing up for yourself. And when you're demonstrating these things, it really can help to support you. It can help to be really good examples of those actions that you're taking that move you towards what you're wanting to do, that help to build up that confidence and that help to build up that success mindset. And so obviously there are a lot of different ones here. You can take a look and see what you identify with. And again, this is the last thing you're going to be writing down for yourself. So write down the one statement that you're really committed to. So whichever one kind of stands out to you, I want you to really commit to this. Obviously, I'm encouraging you to do one. If you want to do all 10, that's great. But let's start with the little steps. What's one thing that you're committed to doing that's these zero talent pieces? So write it down for yourself, but then share this in the chat too. If you want to just put the number, that's fine. Or if you want to put the whole statement, that works too. But just again, another way to hold ourselves accountable with some of the things that we're committing to doing as part of our success mindset and making sure that we're moving ourselves forward. Perfect. So one of the ones that we've got coming in is strong work ethic. Yeah, just being able to bring that work ethic to the different things that you're doing and the different parts of your life. Awesome. What are some other ones? So again, when we start to think about what these are for us, it's a really good way to start. It's making a commitment to ourselves, but it's also just a way to support those other skills that we have. Obviously, support our physical skills, support who we are as people, but also just help us to take those steps forward. And so by writing it down for yourself, that's a really good first step. Again, I encourage you to share it with everyone else, but just being able to be conscious of these things, again, recognizes that sometimes it takes a bit of effort, but that it doesn't take talent. And so it's something that you can actually really be committed to that can make a big difference in terms of how you're acting, how you're thinking about yourself, and that can then translate into performance too. So what we've done is we've gone through our 6 different pieces of things that can help to build the success mindset. So we talked about practice, 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 basically that cycle of how we can practice, be very kind of purposeful with our practice, start to learn from it, make those modifications. That was the first one. Being able to use our strengths. And so obviously referred to the VIA character strengths as an example, having those 24 ones to base your selections off of. But anytime we can be aware of our strengths, again, really helps us to build up where we're at, what we want to be doing, how we want to be moving forward. It can help us to manage some of those challenges that we're dealing with. Addressing our self-talk. And so we talked about a few different ways to do that by being able to reframe, trying to replace it with something that's maybe going to be more effective for ourselves, by accepting that we have a lot of thoughts and that we don't have to actually feed into all of them. And then being able to just immerse ourselves back into what we're doing and being able to immerse ourselves into that present moment. We talked about being able to harness the brain-body connection. And I gave you a couple different examples there with the power pose and smiling. Think about which one you like. Think about how you might use them or when you might use them. But again, the more we can start kind of feeling like we're connected with our brain and our body, it can really help to build and just make us feel like we're more cohesive and more powerful moving forward. Building habits obviously takes a bit of time, but if we can look at some of the different things that we're doing, some of those different actions that support what we're working towards and how we want to be acting, that's going to be a really big part of then helping us to feel more confident, helping us to feel like we've got that success mindset. And then obviously committing to those zero talent improvements. We just talked about that in terms of what are some of those things that you really want to be demonstrating that help to solidify these pieces. When we talk about what kinds of actions should you be taking, we've given you a number of different examples. So you should have some ideas about building your own success mindset and really using your actions to start taking those small steps forward. You obviously don't have to start with all 6 of these. It's to give you a variety of different pieces. Maybe you're starting with 1 or 2 of these and really starting to use those and feel solid with it. And then maybe you're adding in a couple other ones. But the more you can start thinking about them and the more you can start applying them, it just does help with that progress. And remember that it is a process that you want to move forward, you want to take those steps, but it can take a bit of time. It's just about being persistent with it and knowing that it's all part of just that gradual improvement and taking that positive action. So I know that we talked about a lot, obviously, today, gave you some different ideas in terms of building up that success mindset. I know we've talked about a lot in the last month or two with all the sessions that we've done. So I'll pause now. I'm happy to answer questions, whether it's about tonight or maybe other content that we've gone over. As always, my email address is in on the slide as well. So you're more than welcome to reach out to me if you do have any questions that you'd prefer to ask one-on-one. Okay, so and Steve's putting the rules winners in the chat, so check that out. A few different winners there. I'm going to stop the video recording in a minute, just if people do want to ask questions off recording. I know sometimes that's the case, but just wanted to throw it over to Steve, I guess, initially to see if there's any last comments from your end before I stop that.
Yeah, Lisa, thank you so much for the 5 sessions. It's been great. There's so much information, and I think hopefully everybody enjoyed it and take some nuggets from each session, and hopefully that'll help them in the future. And yeah, really
Perfect.
appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, thank you, everyone. I have really enjoyed working with this group. As Steve kind of alluded to, it's not about making sure you do everything all at once. It's just about picking and choosing what works for you, using that as a starting point, and then going from there. So thanks, everyone. I really appreciate it.